Hello everyone. A very good afternoon from UAE and a very good morning to Dr. Fran, who's joining us all the way from Liverpool, UK it's her early morning on a weekend. So we really appreciate your effort, Dr. Fran, to be with us this afternoon. I extend a very warm welcome to today's webinar, and we are delighted to have all of you joining us. I just want to reiterate that we are hosting this webinar in collaboration with Liverpool John Moores University. So as we get started, we would love to know where each one of you you are joining us from. Where are you joining us from? Which part of the world? Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and share your location. We really appreciate that. So that will give us a good understanding of the demographics of where we are and whom we are reaching out to. It's always great to see, the diversity within our audience and to know who all are wanting to connect with Westford and Liverpool John Moores. And before we start the session, very quickly I'll share the housekeeping points to ensure that the session is smooth and it's effective. So I would request all the attendees to please use the chat for their general comments and introduction. If you have any questions, kindly post them in the Q&A section. You can see those tabs on the bar there. We'll be collecting these questions and addressing them towards the end of each section. Dr. Fran will be taking you through, and then at the end of each section, we'll take the questions. Please keep your microphones muted throughout the webinar to minimize the background noise. And we encourage you to engage actively, share your thoughts in the chat, Q&A, all the questions in the Q&A section, and make the most of this learning opportunity. Thank you once again for joining us, and let's see whether you have started to put in the chat where you're coming from. UK, Sudan, wow, Abu Dhabi, Tanzania, Bahrain, wow. Dr. Fran, you have the whole world and all the continents here, I think. Sharjah, Oman, India, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, Myanmar. Okay, great, wonderful. I will just take a minute to go through that. Meanwhile, I will want to actually introduce our speaker for today. And it's my great pleasure actually to introduce our speaker this afternoon, who brings over a decade of experience in higher education and currently serves as Head of Professional Learning and Enterprise at Liverpool John Moores University, and she is Dr. Tracy Fran. In her role, she leads the professional learning initiatives and enterprise programs, working closely with diverse teams to design and implement impactful, forward-thinking teaching strategies. Her work is strongly aligned with LJMU's commitment to academic excellence and innovation, with a particular focus on leveraging technology-enhanced learning to support student success in rapidly evolving educational environments. Today's session will explore how we can engage with generative AI with a more dialogic and critically informed way, supporting both educators and learners to navigate its opportunities and challenges thoughtfully. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Dr. Fran. Over to you.
Thank you ever so much, Poonam, for that lovely introduction. And thank you very much for the invitation to present today. It's very exciting to have the opportunity to speak to such an international cohort. We are based in Liverpool at Liverpool John Moores University. And my role here is in the School of Education, Head of Professional Learning and Enterprise, and I oversee a number of our international partnered programs as well, three of which we have running with Westford. So we have the MA Education, MA Leadership in Education, and the PGCE International as well. So we're very pleased to have a long-standing partnership with Westford, and we hope to continue in our research collaborations as well, because this is such an interesting link to have to get these diverse international perspectives on issues, concerns, and really fascinating topics. I think that we have shared as people who are interested in education, are interested in globalization and social justice, and all of the impacts that they have on our roles as educators as well. So it's very interesting to hear where you're based. It would also be quite useful and interesting to know what kind of roles you are in. I'm assuming generally related to education. In the reason for you being in this seminar at all would be that you have that interest. But if you could just pop into the chat some of the roles that you have as educators, it gives me more of an idea of the kinds of concerns that you may be encountering in relation to the impact of generative AI in education, which I think has affected all of us in education over the last few years.
All right. I think they have started to put in head of primary in British International, educational consultant, technical instructor, English instructor, teaching high school math, AI instructor, English teacher at Al Salam School. Yes, so they are subject teachers, IT teachers, I think, science teacher, maintenance instructor. So I think all from the education background.
That's really, really interesting and great to have you all here. We do have a couple of research groups here at Liverpool, and I'll just go to my next slide. Just to explain that at Liverpool John Moores University in the School of Education, we have a research institute called the Liverpool Institute for Research in Education. Within that research institute, there are a number of different research themes. So I do encourage you to Google. I think it's LIFE is the acronym, which isn't strictly correct, but we like the sound of it. And the QR code here will link you to the research group that I come jointly with Pete Atherton. It's called the Digital Education and Society Research Group. We do encourage affiliate membership of our research group. And if you fill in a short online form, that will go to our Professor Michael Thomas, and he will register you to our team site, which means that you will receive invitations to our seminars and workshops, the majority of which we do host as hybrid activities. Especially for the Digital Education and Society Research Group, because we're quite well aware of using hybrid technologies in our engagement broadly. So please do consider joining this research group. We would love to expand our membership and get a range of practitioner perspectives within our research seminar sessions. We tend to hold them once every couple of months. And we always like to get to know our new research members as well and invite them to do a short Petra Kucha presentation. So do consider reaching out and offering one of those our way. So our mission as the Digital Education and Society Research Group is to advance the understanding and implementation of digital education technologies to foster inclusive, equitable, and innovative learning environments. So it obviously has been one of our really key functions in the last couple of years to look at generative AI, how it has been impacting on education and educators and students, and to try to take a research perspective on what we can do to engage with this technology in an inclusive, equitable, and innovative way. I've also got a LinkedIn page there at Frances Tracy and lots of numbers. So I do encourage you to look me up and follow as well for any information about other events that we may have going on from the School of Education and LJMU as well. So it'd be great to hear from you. So for the webinar today, what we wanted to focus on was getting across to you some of the key questions and approaches and strategies that we've been investigating and developing here at the School of Education. So for a number of years, we've been trying out different technologies that have become available in the category of generative AI. And within that trying out with ourselves as researchers and with our student groups and academic lecturers, we have developed an engagement framework for a way in which to use generative AI tools to guide users from questioning of AI outputs through to the evaluation of those outputs, challenging, reworking, and then production of original academic content. Working with the generative AI tools rather than allowing that generative AI to be the beginning and end of any queries that you may put to it. We feel that that is the kind of hybrid critical approach to the use of what is an incredibly powerful technology which has become available to us. But that we have to be aware of the weaknesses as well as the strengths. We need to maintain our human agency in the use of this new technology and to enable the human voice and human understanding to still come through within that technology use. Here at the School of Education, we do have a group called the AI Accelerator Group, and we've had some lunchtime seminars as well, which has been very interesting to hear different approaches from different organizations and different researchers within those organizations as well. And it really does appear to be a spectrum in terms of attitudes and approaches to the use of generative AI in education. So it's a really fascinating field. I expect in the audience that we have here today, we would get a full range of attitudes, confidence in the use of these technologies, but also concerns as well about the ways in which they might impact on our roles as educators and the nature of knowledge as well in our fields. So we're looking at the importance of human interpretation and critical engagement and ownership of ideas in the webinar today. We did also want to offer some practical tools as well, because we're in practical roles, it sounds like. We have developed some assessment strategies, which we found do help to distinguish between the generative AI use that leads to superficial mimicry, to distinguish between that and authentic learning. So some of these approaches could support yourselves as educators or students in navigating the challenges and opportunities of generative AI. So moving on to this, we do want to consider some of the authentic scholarship challenges which have been put our way by generative AI. One of the key issues is that traditional authorship and academic integrity is being questioned now by the new ability to produce text that may lack context or accountability. There's all sorts of slang terms which we've come to know within the education field when we see a large number of academic essays that have been produced with very little thought and which don't tend to contain much original text and have those I don't want to use the slang terminologies, but generative AI slop, I think, was one of the ones that I heard just the other day. We do come to recognise this more and more, unfortunately. And so we want to talk about ways in which we don't just ban generative AI to try and avoid this poor quality writing arising, but to guide students towards critical engagement and help them with AI generative fluency, promoting dialogical knowledge exchange, because this is a powerful tool. So we do need to integrate AI literacy while also protecting disciplinary standards and ensuring transparent evaluation processes. So when we were looking at writing in academia, the role of the written word and literacy, we drew on concepts from Mikhail Bakhtin, and I'll introduce some of those ideas throughout the webinar. But a key term or terms that I may be using within this webinar are dialogicality, which refers to the idea that all communication is fundamentally relational and shaped by interaction between voices. Every utterance responds to previous voices and anticipates future ones. So meaning is created through dialogue and not in isolation. So it's that dialogue with the generative AI that we want to encourage. Heteroglossia is another term that I'll be using, which describes the presence of multiple voices, perspectives, and discourses within any text or communicative setting. So language is never singular. It's saturated with competing viewpoints, traditions, values, and assumptions. And of course, this is what is lost when you have a text predictor essentially producing words by looking at the likelihood of one following the other. The generative AI could not consider viewpoints, traditions, values, and assumptions. So I want to acknowledge my colleagues as long-term researchers, Graham Downs, Phil Rothwell, and Matt McLean. Together, we wrote a chapter for a book which is being published this year. The chapter is called Teaching and Learning with Generative AI, a 5-stage model for dialogic and critical engagement. So we will make sure to send out links to this as soon as it is published. It's a Springer book, which will be called Reframing Education with Responsible Generative AI Use. Very much. So we're drawing on this 5-stage model from that particular chapter. And this is the diagram that we've developed for the 5-stage model. It went through several different versions. I quite like this one because it looks a little bit like a sort of a fetus in my mind, but maybe I'm looking at it in a very feminine way. It's sort of beginning there with number 1 and it's ending there with the head at originating. At some point it took all sorts of it was triangular and it's been a star, but we wanted to try and give the impression that this starts at the beginning, but it is continual. So this is a continual process of dialogue using generative AI tools along the way. So phase 1 is opening up the dialogic space with the first engagement with generative AI. Phase 2 is evaluation. Then phase 3 is dialogical challenging. Phase 4 is reworking. And phase 5 is originating and taking ownership of the written work. So this provides a developmental framework for understanding how learners and researchers can use large language models to enhance rather than replace authentic academic thinking. The model traces a progression from early exploratory prompting to the production of genuinely owned, accountable scholarly work. Although it's presented in 5 phases, as I'm saying, we do hope that people can move back and forth between them and cycle around. So back and forth as your understanding develops. So you're engaging in a dialogue with the generative AI itself. So phase 1 is opening up the dialogic space. this is where you can put your first prompt into your generative AI large language model and look at the concept on a surface level. So you might want to clarify concepts that you have, identify possible lines of inquiries, put in some different ideas to help clarify your thinking, what it is that you are investigating further. Here you will find that multiple voices, frames, and fragments of discourse will be presented to you from the large language model. So this is really what we want to show as the very first phase. The danger is if you take this first output and call it a finished piece, you've got something which is lacking in meaning and lacking in human interpretation. So this is really only the provisional response. Where you can ask new questions, challenge assumptions, and then extend the scope of inquiry. And actually, large language models are incredibly useful at doing this because they have access to huge amounts of data and information that can be really useful to you in those first early stages of inquiry. So we don't want this to be seen as the creation of a finished answer, the very first step. So it's academic questioning rather than information seeking. So we don't accept the first findings from these initial inquiries. We're just exploring the field. So phase 2 really is starting to look at the outputs of those inquiries critically. So large language model outputs are stochastic, which means actually if you ask different generative AI models on different days, the same question, you will get quite varying answers. So you really can't take them as authoritative. You do need to test credibility, accuracy, and disciplinary positioning as well. We've played with this quite a bit. Well, myself, Matt, Graham, and Phil have tried out using different generative AI models and putting in the same prompts. And it's fascinating to see what different responses you get from different models. But also it's been learning about us, and it's always eager to please as well. So you get quite different responses. You really do need to be aware of the credibility and accuracy is very questionable. You do need to investigate further. So first of all, you want to check the surface accuracy, checking facts, dates, citations, and definitions, because it will just hallucinate various different things. Different AI tools, different strengths and weaknesses in this field. Then we need to look at how the ideas are represented and what assumptions they carry as well. It's almost like you need to get your marking head on. So for those of us who mark other students' work, you're kind of marking the very first output from your generative AI. How are these ideas being represented? What assumptions has the generative AI come up with? Of course, it holds all of the bias that there is, unfortunately, in the data in the internet. So we need to be aware of all that bias as well. Which perspectives are privileged and which have been admitted in this? So where does that text sit, within or outside wider scholarly debates and disciplinary conversations? So this does need to be anchored in credible knowledge, which prevents the drift into what looks like a persuasive but basically unreliable claim. So it's always a good idea to do the first surface level check your dates, citations, definitions, because it does make them up. Right. Phase 3, we are looking at dialogical challenging. Here, the learner shifts from receiving information to reframing, contesting, and developing a stance. So rather than asking a large language model, what is X? We now want to develop our prompts further, and there are whole fields in improving your prompt structures, which I'd recommend looking into. So now see if we can put in queries such as, if I argue X, what challenges might arise? This marks a transition from the human to large language model space. to the human academic world, where ideas withstand scrutiny from peers, tutors, examiners, and the discipline itself. So Bakhtin has the notion of addressivity, so that you have to always consider your audience and who may be judging and questioning the information that you're presenting. So direct towards a real audience and a disciplinary expectation for that audience as well. The large language model can still serve as a low stakes interlocutor, but it cannot provide the evaluative horizon or authoritative judgment that belongs to human scholarly communities. So we're moving from analysing AI outputs to challenging and positioning ideas within academic debates. This is where we want to revisit the content of the teaching sessions, the lectures, the key texts that you have been considering within your teaching so far. Phase 4 then is a reworking. So taking that raw or provisional material and reshaping it into a coherent, disciplined and accountable argument. So here we're looking at re-accentuation. So infusing borrowed language with new intention, voice, and evaluative stance. So you may need to restructure ideas, you may need to synthesize sources, write text into your own voice. Through time, we all develop our own academic writing voice, and we wouldn't want to lose that from taking on board generative AI styles. And it helps if you can then rewrite into your own style and approach. We do want to align our arguments with disciplinary norms as well. This takes experience and knowledge of your field. We do want to identify where further evidence or nuance is required. And this might be a point at which then we go back to phase 1 and try another prompt and another prompt to gather more information and try and identify what might be missing and what assumptions have been made. So at this point, your LLM is a secondary support rather than a co-author. The core work is being done by the human writer, who interprets, integrates, and transforms the ideas into academically situated knowledge. So students transform the AI-supported material into independent arguments by rewriting and reorganizing with academic rigor. And finally, at phase 5, we have authentic academic ownership. So this is reached when the learner produces a fully owned, original, and defensible academic work. So authorship is no longer derivative of LLM outputs. The writer has demonstrated clarity of intention, command of evidence, and an ability to justify choices in relation to disciplinary frameworks. So we can no longer say it's incorrect because ChatGPT provided it to me. We've been through a whole process of critique, cross-checking, and human interpretation within the field as well. So then the learner can explain and defend their argument orally or in writing. They can justify their methodological or conceptual decisions. They can situate their claims within wider debates, acknowledge limitations and anticipate critique, and revise their work in response to human feedback. So in Bakhtinian terms, this is the point at which the writer's voice emerges as answerable. You would be able to talk about this with an academic audience. And so the Viva and other alternative assessments to the written word can be an option here to evaluate whether that process of ownership has taken place, despite having used generative AI in the production of your written text. So to summarize, the 5-phase model makes visible the interpretive, critical, and dialogic labor that turns machine-generated fragments into credible human academic work. It shows that while LLMs may support early exploration, authentic scholarship emerges only when learners evaluate, challenge, rework, and ultimately take ownership of their ideas within the human-to-human chronotopes of academic life. So this encourages the use of generative AI, but also shows a structure in which you go through a process in its use to end up with what is essentially a human production, which is critically engaged and a quality piece of academic writing. To explain the use of the word chromato, this is the term for the time-space structures that shape how communication, narratives, and academic practices unfold. They're described as the temporal and spatial frames within which academic work takes place, such as your coursework cycles, peer review, doctoral development, seminars, conferences, and institutional settings. These organise how knowledge is produced, judged, and circulated. So at this point, I'd like to pause for comments, thoughts, any challenges that you would like to present within the chat. And I can take a few moments to try and answer and respond to those. So I'll just look out for Poonam, who's been fielding the chat for me.
Wonderful. So I'll just go through the Q&A. There aren't any questions in the Q&A. So you can take a moment to just think about, reflect on what the five-phase model Dr. Fran has just shared. And you have any questions around that, about the research that they have done or how it has informed the, framework itself, you can put it in the Q&A. Let me just check chat as well if there aren't any questions in the chat yet. Okay, so then by the show of your hand or your thumbs up or something, you can let us know whether you're in good space. Okay, now there is a question. Hi, doctor, which is the most reliable AI? I guess tool. They want to say, which is the most reliable AI tool? Because you were comparing, mentioning that you have shared different ChatGPT and different tools to check.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I wish I could answer that question. It isn't, well, I won't say impossible question to answer. It's not possible for me to answer that question because I'm not an information technology expert. I am a very interested person in the field. I do investigate this myself quite a lot. In terms of reliability, of course, it really depends. Well, the different generative AI tools have different strengths and different weaknesses. We have found that ChatGPT is very questionable, and it does hallucinate quite a lot. It really does want to please you in its answer rather than get the correct answer. So particularly if I'm thinking about an educational academic context, then ChatGPT is unreliable for that, which is very unfortunate because, of course, it's free. And it's the best known generative AI, so it tends to be the one that our students use a lot. And we can recognize the failings of that tool being used in our students' work as well. And some of the key assessment approaches I'm going to talk about kind of respond to that as well. The failings of a tool like ChatGPT. I mean, this changes every day as well because new large language models are being developed. They're being developed for different purposes. Unfortunately, usually it's huge multinational companies who are developing them, not necessarily for education purposes, of course, probably for financial purposes. So it really depends what your task is as well. We at LJMU subscribe to the use of Copilot, which when you have upgraded versions which can work with your Windows 365, have other strengths, it tends not to be so unreliable in terms of hallucinations, but it's not really made for academic work. It's more for administration within education, which is quite good at doing. My colleague Graham Downs has been enjoying the use of Claude, but he has to pay to get a useful version of it. So that's a weakness of that. And of course, we have ethical concerns with some of the other generative AI tools that might be more media focused, social media focused. And so we might question whether we want to use those or not. Gemini is quite useful if you're doing image-based work and you're trying to produce something like PowerPoints. But I think they all have their strengths and weaknesses, and they're all changing all of the time. So I think every tool that you use, you want to take that critical questioning approach with it, check everything that it provides to you. I will say that one tool I have found very useful in academia is called Consensus. Which is sort of enhanced literature finding tools. If you put a query initial thought into Consensus, it can find you the top 10 academic papers in that field and summarize the general findings from them. Most useful in sort of quantitative medical contexts, but it will find some social science tools as well. But of course, always with the proviso that it will have chosen things based on probably a financial subscription model, so they might not be the best academic papers, that just the ones that it wants to provide to you. And they tend to be the ones that are most cited. So any new papers will have lower numbers of citations and might not come up within that kind of tool. So always just to be critically aware of that use. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think we have quite a few questions now here, so I'm just going to quickly take them. What would be the right age to introduce learners to AI, considering many of the joinees are from school space? So, and like just to ensure, like in India, I think they have identified grade 3 to introduce AI. So that's like essentially maybe 8, 9 years old, I guess. So hence the question, I suppose.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think, the critical use of AI, testing it out, playing with it in an education environment is going to be really important to do from quite an early age. But making sure that you are doing that critical testing out, that we're not taking responses as at face value, because we really do need to support that new generation to be able to use these tools in a critical evaluative way, but to enjoy them as well with their strengths. So I have 2 young children, and so we quite enjoy playing with Alexa, testing the limits of Alexa and seeing what does and what doesn't work in terms of a query to that kind of a chatbot interface. So yeah, I think grade 3 is a great stage at which to start introducing, but in a structured sort of education environment where we're finding its limits and also talking about where the information has come from and why it may be biased or challenged in different ways.
Yeah, wonderful. Actually, I agree with you on that because I think that's the critical age where they are trying to make sense of the world around them, analyze what they're learning and stuff. So yeah, that will be, and Alexa is a good example. I do engage with Alexa to um, find my points of discussions. Now here we have, so similar question has been asked by Derek and some anonymous attendees. So lower level learners of English language and whether it is okay to use AI for grade 4 and 5. So since Dr. Fran like just mentioned about level 3, so I think you can infer the answers from there. The next question is, how do you avoid plagiarism completely while using the AI? To some extent, some of the information you think is original could be classified as plagiarism.
Exactly, and that's where we're saying you need to critically review the information that is provided to you from the generative AI. You need to check its sources and check its accuracy, because it may well have done a direct quote without acknowledging it within its output. And ultimately, it's your responsibility to know whether or not that has been plagiarized text. And of course, in education settings, that will show up if you submit a piece of work for assessment. So this is the proviso that you cannot take the the original text provided to you from generative AI and put it into your own writing, because it quite likely will be plagiarized information. So it's more a prompt and an idea generator rather than a text generator.
Thank you for that response, Dr. Fran. Other question is actually, this is like serve me on a platter. Which platforms can we use to plan lesson slides and create critical thinking questions for Year 5 engaging activities?
I have to say I'm not an expert in that. I know there are quite a few paid platforms. We've had people present to us for primary and secondary education in the UK, platforms that have been developed to help with these specific things. So I wouldn't promote any of those particular ones myself, but they are out there. And as I was saying, at LJMU itself, we use Copilot because it integrates with all of our other tools. So PowerPoint generation can be done using that tool. I have to say it's never very inspiring, the output from Copilot for that. So I'm going to say there are other people who are more expert to answer that question, who have specifically developed generative AI tools for education context.
Right. Thank you for your answer. So the last one here is, so doctor, how AI has become a challenge in recent days for the most academic works, and how do you detect the work as it is from AI tool? I think I think you mentioned that in previously, that it's just the way it is presented, and certain punctuation marks, certain the way the sentences are framed. I think you get to know
There
that.
are key things that you get to know, definitely. We don't, we know that Turnitin for higher education does have a tool to apparently detect the use of AI, but we found it to be unreliable, so we don't use it. We rather judge the text on its quality. If it's a poor quality text, then we mark it as such. Sometimes it's absolutely obvious when AI has been used, because it's an exact copy paste, and that's a very poor piece of writing. And we may put that towards an academic misconduct panel, but we have different tiers of acceptable AI use within different modules that we teach on, because we do want to support and encourage the use of AI for certain activities. And so it's only if we've actually categorized a piece of work as generative AI use is unacceptable entirely, that we would be trying to identify that and to mark it as academic misconduct. So it's a bit of a complicated answer on that one. I think the best thing to do is to judge the piece of work on its quality, as we always have done, because poor use of generative AI will produce a poor piece of text, and it's quite easy to identify that.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Thank you, Dr. Fran. So this is a statement as well as a question. I love the model. The one you presented just now is what Helen is saying. Thanks, Doctor, and it's very useful for us educators to discuss it. But don't you think that it will be a very useful model, I think, to introduce it to learners themselves to focus on critical evaluation of their own work after using generative AI? So like using the model that you just presented onto the school, and then empowering them to use it ethically and professionally, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. And we would really encourage people to take this model forward, to present it to students, because I think that they are concerned about the use of generative AI. A lot of people are scared to use it because they feel that it is banned, it is unethical, that it is plagiarizing. But in fact, professional practice is very likely to be using this in the future for our students. So we do need to support students to critically engage with generative AI, but eventually to produce a high standard human authored text. So yes, please do integrate the five-phase model in this. Later in the webinar, I do also present some practical approaches to use with this as well.
Thank you. And there is again a statement in the Q&A. Challenges would be trainees abusing generative AI to answer the questions. So yeah, I think that's been answered through the other questions. So I hope that's okay. There are some statements again in the chat, which I can see. There's a question here in the chat. What is the most difficult thing students might face when they use this model from phase one to phase five? Which one would be the most difficult thing?
I think the really challenging part, and it's challenging in academia, in education, in learning at all, is finding that voice and situating your writing for the audience. That's the kind of academic human side that you need to bring into play, and that is not something that you can do in the early stages as a learner. That takes experience, that takes getting it wrong and getting critical feedback and being able to develop that. That takes being able to present it, to be questioned, have to answer those questions. And so it takes time and learning to be able to do that. So we would expect our learners not to be very strong in those stages to start off with, particularly in higher education. In the first year that they join us, we don't expect them to be able to find a critical academic voice and critically review the outputs of generative AI to start off with. That's something that we develop through their learning, and we want to see it in the third year, and we want to see that has been a development in their understanding as we go through. So there's no easy answers here. Writing has always been a challenging but very rewarding approach to the presentation of knowledge within our field.
So there's an observation. I have just successfully completed my MBA as a mature student. Challenge is at both the knowledge generation by the student and over-reliance by the educators in using AI to assess student work using tools such as Turnitin. Both are tools, and once in wrong hands are destructive. This is an important webinar. So there are, I'm sure, some key takeaways he's got from here, this part of the seminar. Then may I add, dear doctor, that our fascination with AI led to the innovation and mental independence to diminish. After all, generative AI is a shell, a means to achieve an end. How to make use of AI without falling into the risk of its drawback. So I guess, Chris, I think the points that Dr. Fran mentioned kind of alludes to your question. What I find about AI is in education space is that different generative tools are increasingly introduced to increasingly younger kids, but there's little education on the ethics of the use until perhaps quite later. Most schooling kids tend to focus on completion of their work versus ethical use of AI to do so. Do you feel like any for kids, especially, their critical thinking is perhaps diminishing when the answers are pretty much served up to them on a platter? We are increasingly finding younger generation are scoring an all-time low on the exams as a whole, and countries like Sweden are removing edutech altogether for traditional model. Just a thought. So there is a question there, but then there is some thought as well. So, like introducing it to the younger kids, again, it's coming back to that. Is it good practice or not? So I think we can't do away with it. I mean, that's what, like when we are working with schools here in UAE, especially the national agenda is to actually train teachers and students to use AI ethically and comprehensively within the next 10 years, like say not even 10 actually, it's 2031. So that's the national agenda. So we can't shy away with it, but shy away from it. But then, yeah, of course, we have to look at ways where it empowers the student and not makes it a kind of a handicap, if I may use that word. Yeah. So, and your thoughts on it, Doctor?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's very similar to the introduction of other revolutionary technologies, if you like, the invention of the internet, the calculator. There's always the danger then that we lose track of how that information is sourced, how it is structured, and how it is provided. Different generations encounter those technologies at different stages, and so my generation saw the first beginnings of the internet, and of course the concerns that there were in relation to being able to access information in such a broad scope, although it did take about half an hour to get a web page in the first days. So we've seen the ways in which the internet has impacted on our lives, for the positive and the negative as well. And I think what we want to get for the younger generation is a view of where that information has come from, how you can do things without it. So starting without it, I love the idea of that, but then you do need to introduce it in an educational setting with that structure so that you can identify the strengths and weaknesses of it as well, because we don't want that assumption that it will do everything for you, because we know that it really won't do quality work for you, and it won't always give you the right answer. And so, yeah, I think we do need to introduce it quite early, but in a structured way to help young people to identify what the issues are with this as well, and how we can use it in a more positive and
Brilliant. So thank you all for your questions in the Q&A and in the chat box as well. And thank you, Doctor, for taking those questions. I think we are ready for the next section.
Thanks very much for your questions. That's been a really interesting conversation. We now will move on to a section where we talk a bit more about practicalities. This is just some ideas from our experience here at LJMU. So some practical tools for authentic engagement. We have developed 5 practical strategies that help academics to distinguish between AI-generated mimicry and genuine academic reasoning. So the first of those is diagramming for understanding. So we found that building in the process of diagramming reveals students' conceptual structures and synthesis. So it helps to distinguish genuine reasoning from AI mimicry. So you could ask students as part of either your sessions, your teaching, or the assessment process to produce maps which show the connections between different theories and visually showing tensions between different ideas and thoughts. This is something that you can have generative AI involved with, but essentially those connections need to be explainable by the students themselves. And this could be built into a form of assessment, or as I say, it could be one of the structured parts of a piece of coursework that you build upon. Another thing that we've really found highlights students' understandings of a particular topic is to ask them to do a Petra Kucha style micro presentation to see if they can concisely articulate their ideas in their own words. So you could ask, for example, a student to explain the implications of LLM inaccurate summaries for criminology research, referencing evaluation and dialogical challenging. So turn the critical evaluation of LLMs into the assessment process itself to be the focus of your assessment item. This has been built into a number of different disciplines here at LJMU to give that supportive process in the use of generative AI in a critical way. We also have found that there are some quick ways to check the credibility of written work. The most commonly used generative AI for poor academic practice has been asking ChatGPT to write your essay just by putting in the essay title. And what you get is a very poor output. And as I say, it tends to hallucinate a lot of the sources. So we find that we will check at least 3 of the citations from students' work. And if we find 3 to be fabricated or unverifiable, then we have a strong suspicion of LLM use, and we feel that they have crossed the agreed credibility threshold. So we would most likely put that forward for a further investigation through academic misconduct. It's not so much the fact that the generative AI has been used in this case, but it's been used and then not critically checked. So you need to take responsibility for the output from that generative AI. If you've not checked your sources, and at least 3 of them do not even exist or are unverifiable, then that's a very poor piece of academic work. Then we have started introducing short fivers into some of our assessment practices. So oral examinations, which can test ownership and adaptability. We can query further the students' understanding of the topic themselves, which we're likely to find that they're not able to respond to our questions if they have uncritically sourced information from generative AI. And another idea that we know has been integrated into some of the business studies courses here is asking students to keep a record of their prompt logs in their use of generative AI. So they can provide transparency on that dialogical process that they've had with the LLM. So you could ask a student, what perspective was absent from your AI-supported literature search? This draws out evaluative understanding of discourse and bias as well. So it's supporting the critical use of generative AI by embedding that in the assessment process itself. So with prompt logs, we think there's a real strength in being able to see the structure that the student has used in engaging with the LLM. And there are some ways in which we can support that as well to make a stronger output from the LLM. So initially, AI output gives a summary, reflective evaluation, and next inquiry steps. So we would like to see what their initial prompt was, what the short AI summary was that came out of that, then ask them to reflect on what they noticed from that. And what they need to ask next within that prompt. So this is the first initial stages of supporting our students to be evaluating those initial outputs from Gen AI, not taking them as correct in an unquestioning way. So those logs demonstrate transparency. They document errors, missing perspectives, and missing claim verifications. So it will show where there are fabricated references, misquotes, and missing voices. So errors can be corrected transparently. So we give a scaffold structure to our students to go through that process. This will enhance their metacognitive awareness by making them aware of their reasoning, improving supervision, and reflective writing. So the log helps to see how understanding has changed, where the assumptions showed up, and why the questions were revised. And it also helps support that process of iterative research, not taking the first prompt output as correct, but showing how that prompt has been refined. It's refined the research focus. It shows decision-making across the different multiple inquiry cycles as well. And it's fascinating to see the different ways in which the students' understanding and the outputs have developed through that process. So for example, here's a high quality academic prompt. If we are prompting students to compare theories, identify limits, and avoid false references, we want them to ask deeper questions. For example, compare play-based learning with Montessori approaches and highlight theoretical tensions. Avoid fabricated references and use reliable sources. And it's important that we learn that you do need to specifically tell the generative AI not to fabricate your references. Even when you do, it still does fabricate your references that we have found. So you do still need to check, but it does help if you're really, really specific about your expectations for the tool. So there are ways in which to improve your prompts within this process. So the prompt fosters nuanced dialogue, accuracy, source verification, and critical questioning as well in student assignments. Another example is provide competing interpretations of youth diversion programs from restorative and punitive perspectives. For each view, identify assumptions, biases, and any limitations in your own summary. Flag any claims that require verification. So we're asking students to particularly identify those assumptions and biases as well. That's highlighting that they are going to be there within the text. So this is a skill-shaping inquiry. The scope, tone, and ethical considerations need to be drawn into the use of AI. That other example, I'll leave that to read. And it also supports teaching practices. So workshops and feedback can help students to craft prompts that enhance reasoning rather than outsource it. So the structure of your prompt itself can really help to enhance different critical perspectives on the topic that you're looking into. So you can workshop this with your students within your sessions and provide the live feedback and critical evaluation of the outputs from that. Here are some simulated case studies that we're using as exemplars of dialogic engagement. For example, here at LJMU, we have students of education and early childhood studies. And here are some dissertation examples. AI-assisted model comparison. Students could carry out their dissertation research using AI to compare key play-based learning with Montessori methods frameworks, initiating scholarly development. So actually purposefully engaging with the AI tools to carry out your research in your third year. Then we could follow through with the critical evaluation of that AI output. So they identify and assess the inaccuracies, hallucinated citations generated by AI, ensuring academic integrity. And if they could keep a log of that, then that's very useful for us to be able to see as evaluators. Then we want to see them following through with independent synthesis and writing of that output. So the student rewrites and synthesizes the material into a coherent thematic structure aligned with education and early childhood pedagogy theories. So that's where they need to review the context and theories from their degree to draw that into the evaluation of the material that's been generated by AI. This enables them to demonstrate concept ownership. And a supervised reviver will reveal whether the student clearly has ownership of those concepts. This enables them to showcase authentic scholarly voice and their own understanding as well. So the student can evaluate how Montessori materials, child-led exploration, and prepared environments shape conceptual development within play-based learning contexts. So we are looking at ways to diversify the final research project on degrees in higher education to enable more of that Viva process as well, rather than a simple presentation of a final thesis. Of course, if you do a PhD, you have your Viva as the final assessment for that. And that's the key point at which you get to demonstrate that you have that critical academic knowledge of the field that you've been researching. It's often seen as the final point in your research, which is a great opportunity to talk about what you've found. And that might be something that we start to build into third year assessments more and more. Another example here is from justice studies, where a student has used AI to compare contemporary criminal justice issues while drawing on interdisciplinary theory and practice that blends legal education with real-world justice practice. There have been some quite well-known misuses of AI in the criminal legal fields, where, of course, a lot of information can be garnered from a large language model, but they have occasionally been used without checking, and that has dire consequences in this field. So within criminal justice, particularly, we really need to support our new professionals in the evaluative use of generative AI. So we want students to be looking at the critical evaluation of that AI output. Students are supported in identifying inaccuracies within the AI-generated summaries and verifying claims using links with local courts, prisons, and third sector justice agencies to offer real insight into the criminal justice system in action. Then again, we want the student to rewrite and synthesize that material into a coherent thematic structure, going through that 5-stage, demonstrating concept ownership through reflective analysis, applied tasks, engagement with practitioners, and then demonstrating ownership of the concepts, leading to real-world learning integration, where the student enriches their understanding through practical exposure, including simulated investigative work and community partnership that connect academic learning with operational justice settings. So finally, after some of those practical examples, obviously all in a higher education context, I did want to go back to you to see if we prompted any other questions or comments or suggestions based on your experience as well of the use of or lack of use of generative AI in education.
All right. So we do have a question here. It says, does this create more work for the teacher or the professor?
Initially, yes, we're all learning. And of course, we can't continue to do the same processes of assessment as we have done previously. I think we do all need to adapt. We can't support our students in the critical use of AI if we haven't worked out how to do it ourselves, and it is a process. So the truth is, yes, initially there is going to be more scholarship for us and adaptation. Of course, we would want to be continually doing that anyway, and I think there's a strength in a way in it, admitting to our students and learner communities that we're all doing this together. And to talk about that as well. We are trying to provide supportive structures with groups of educators. This is where we came up with the AI accelerator, and we're linking with other academics. One idea that we're hoping to develop is the idea of an assessment hackathon. So we want to have a few workshops with module leaders who can bring along their assessment as it stands at the moment, and we'll do a swap, and we will see if using free generative AI tools, the other academic can produce a passable piece of work based on the learning outcomes and structure provided, and then work together as a group to then develop that. To find elements within it which could test more for the critical evaluative stance for each student. And that's something that I think we need to do as a group and as a community to share our practices as well, because there are things that we can learn from different disciplines within this field.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Fran. So the other question here is, do you recommend and support creating exams or examination papers, I guess, using AI? And what about creating videos for training through AI agent rather than using traditional methods?
I think the same goes for that, in that,
Yeah.
yes, it can be a useful tool for speeding up that process, but you have to check everything that it produces. So you can't
You can't
rely
do
on
away with
that.
human element.
Exactly. You need to check that it might give you a first draft, say, of your multiple choice questions, but then you have to go through the process of checking that they're all correct as well. So it would speed things up for you in the use of that, and I don't see any problems with that. There was exams, and what was the second one? Do you know?
Creating videos,
Videos.
training
Well,
videos. Yeah,
yeah, again, we've seen the use of avatars for producing videos as well, which is
absolutely.
it's interesting, it's getting better. I think it's the same issues with videos. I think it's very hard to pay attention to a pre-recorded video for a long time. And particularly when it's an avatar, it's quite difficult to watch it for a long time. But it's the quality of the content and the engagement in the video that really matters. I think a video is quite heavy on the sort of AI use. It uses a lot of energy to produce those, and I think people do enjoy seeing a real life human being speaking as well. So it's one of those, you determine the quality for yourself. It's got strengths and weaknesses.
Absolutely. Everything actually in life has its pros and cons, isn't
I
it?
feel like I keep saying that.
All right. So we have another one. Doctor, can you suggest some good reads for AI for educators and students as well?
I've got a couple of them in front of me at the moment. Local research to us in Manchester, not far from Liverpool, Mark Carrigan, Generative AI for academics. It's a very practical approach. This has been published very recently. You find Mark Carrigan on LinkedIn as well. He's very active on there, and also hosts some workshops, I think, which are online, which you might want to look into. I find this very interesting. And in terms of very practical approaches, I've got this one here. Generative AI in the Classroom by Laura Knight. For people who like a physical book, that's available there. I think there is a digital version. This is published by Sage. Also, there's an awful lot of YouTube video sources that you can go to for support. And I forget the name of the no, it's not going to come to me. I have been trying to engage further with blog posts in this field because it's so fast moving.
Yeah.
It by the time it's printed in a book,
It's
it's
already
probably
outdated. Yeah, I agree with you
along
on
a
that.
bit,
Yeah.
particularly for questions like which is the most reliable AI, that can change week on week, and what you can do with them as well as being developed very quickly. So I would encourage finding some of the key researchers through LinkedIn, and they often offer webinars as well. I will be posting, if I find any quality sources, I'll put them on my LinkedIn as well, and we'll be promoting things through Digital Education and Society, and sort of keep in touch with us really, because we want to support the use of generative AI as an educators community.
Absolutely agree with that. I like, because we are as part of the PGCI and master's program in education and educational leadership. So we came across these two frameworks by UNESCO. UNESCO's AI competency framework for teachers. I've put the link in the chat. And then there is another one which is for students. Let me see if I can get my hands on to the students one. So those are two very interesting ones, which I think you can actually, looking at the same link, you can probably Google for students. So it's quite interesting for people who are looking to, how to frame their policies around use of AI and everything. That will be helpful, I guess. So there is another question. Thanks, doctor. How genuine is that are the tools that seem to be AI humanized tools? Because there are plenty of them recently, I can see. Does it still affect the conceptual detection? I think this has been answered, but do you want to comment on that, Dr. Fran?
Yeah, well, I don't feel like I have the expertise to answer that specifically because I'm not on the cutting edge of the tool.
More from the academia, and yeah, that's right. Yeah. But then I think in a way you mentioned that like we have to be critically analyzing all the time, and we can't do away with that analysis part of it, because those hallucinations and all of that what you mentioned actually kind of creates that blur. And unless you are really at it and you know the basic fundamental essentials, um, AI tools can really misguide you at times.
Yeah, and I expect they will become more and more sophisticated and more,
And yeah,
which gives strength to the argument we should always go through a process with it, because more and more we will feel that the first output from the first prompt looks convincing. But to see that as the very first stage within your research and evaluation is and go through a cycle with it in its use. I think, yeah.
fair enough. Yeah. I'm just sometimes trying to play devil's advocate as well. So somebody mentioned in the chat that they can't see the link. So if Chencho can help me, I am actually posting the link again. And if they're not able to see, if you can share it with the attendees, because I think I'm not able to post it for the other attendees. So it's only hosts and panelists. Right. Thank you. Any other questions? No, we don't have any other question at the moment. I think we are good to go for the next part. Yeah.
Oh, I think actually, I've misled because we're at the end of the presentation. I thought
Okay.
there were two parts, and we've done the initial part and then the practical side.
Practical parts also. Yes. Okay,
I'd
so
like
we are
to
open to take any questions that we have. Yes, I
just
do.
asking
Okay,
for
yeah, no, Kate is, yeah, somebody is typing the question actually. You can go ahead and type the questions. So we did the research part of it, and then Dr. Fran shared the examples and case studies, which they are learning from, of course, at the university as well. So if you have any other particular questions around that.
if I could also promote future engagement with our research in this field. We are developing a questionnaire for students, but also academics, on the acceptance and confidence in the use of generative AI in education. We're using a classic questionnaire structure based on technology acceptance model, but it's been updated and developed for generative AI use. It's been broadly used by other researchers internationally, but we would like to present that to yourselves as international educators audience, and ask you to complete it so that we can do a comparison with our own academics and students from here at LJMU. To see if there are any interesting differences in attitudes and competencies, and it can help us to develop future support materials as well. So I will follow up after this session with Westford's gatekeeper advice with a link to a questionnaire. So if you could all consider filling that in for us, it will be anonymous. But ask for a bit of background on your education experience, so that we can do some comparison and move forwards in how to support ourselves as a community of educators. So please do look out for that from us, from Digital Education and Society. It'd be useful to get as many people completing it as possible to get a really broad overview of that. And I see that we got 117 participants here, so it would be fantastic to get that many responses on a questionnaire, and then we can build on our understanding of the use of this in education.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Dr. Fran, for very engaging and informative session. And I think this is, as you mentioned, this is quite an ongoing topic. And as we speak, things are changing. So it's really the advice that you gave that, you need to kind of connect with people on LinkedIn, those who are engaging in these kind of research. So yeah, look out for Dr. Fran's LinkedIn profile, connect with her. And also, I hope if you can just bring out that QR code again for the students to, for the joinees to scan if they wish to. So you can actually get, connected with the research which is happening at the university level as well. And of course, I'm sure all the participants who have joined today have interest in AI and how it's developing and how it's empowering us as educators and human beings. So I think everyone would be quite okay to participate in the questionnaire that you have. So would you be sharing the link to the questionnaire later? Okay.
Yes, please, if that's possible.
Wonderful. So once you share that, we will be sharing it with all the attendees, and we'll create a community of investigators, researchers together, and see how we can add to the space, which is so volatile. If I can use that word, I'm not sure, but definitely in the VUCA world, yeah. Okay, so if we do not have any other questions, okay, I think I have some here now. All right, give me a second. So the first one is, I think, a statement. I think the best step is to make learners understand that critical thinking is important for progress and not to be over dependent on AI as it is only a shortcut. Absolutely. I think that's what Dr. Fran was alluding to. Would you like to add something to that statement, Dr. Fran?
Complete agreement with that, yes.
Thank you. Then we have Kate. I tend to ask AI to give me links to specific academic platforms such as ResearchGate, Gesture. Then once the student has downloaded the book article confirming that it is genuine, I encourage them to then upload it to the AI platform. So, for example, Chatai. I hope I'm pronouncing it properly, and engage with AI. Would you say that it's a good approach? So using AI for research, to look for academic platforms, and then reversing it the other way around.
That sounds like an interesting approach to use it as a kind of shortcut to speed up your life. It's working as a sort of administrative assistant in that. I suppose the one thing I would say is that we do all need to be careful about what we re-upload to any free platform, because we are essentially then putting that data into their own large language model, and particularly in education, if you might have somebody's intellectual property.
Absolutely.
You have to be careful whether you are putting it out there, if you like. Although some platforms are closed, so that the Copilot we use here at LJMU is closed to the system of LJMU.
Absolutely, I agree with you on that. Yes. Because there are rules around and some policies around that, right? Yeah. So what about having AI chatbot to assist learners in accessing relevant information?
Yeah, very useful tool. And I think it'd be great if educators could learn how to make their own chatbots, because then you control the large language model that it's inputting into your chatbot as well. You have a maths secondary school teacher here who's developed their own chatbot with their students. So yeah, I would encourage the use of that. I know that there are some LinkedIn learning videos on how to do that.
Yeah, I think I love that, because to do something, you need to know just where to go and follow the instructions and, kind of complete that task or whatever you're looking for.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in fact, I think somebody already mentioned, and you also mentioned this, that we have to use it very mindfully and also ethically. It's really important because I'm not sure whether like everyone has read about it. I had a vested interest because I have a very close friend who's working for one of the big fives, big five companies. I'll not name, you can again Google it. So they were actually fined about close to, how much was it? Close to $300,000 for using AI just rampantly and submitting a report for a government project. And it was found out that it was through AI. It was not, and like they had really, they were very, they had charged very heavy fees for that, for the consultancy reports. And yeah, it was, it kind of boomeranged. So somebody had mentioned in the chat, like people using the trainees or new joinees using it mindlessly and, facing the repercussions. So of course, we have to have these kind of conversations with our students as well, because when they are growing, they need to understand like what is acceptable, what is unacceptable, negotiable, and what are definitely non-negotiables. Yeah. So thank you for the wonderful webinar. It was absolutely, enlightening, and I'm sure there were some key takeaways for all of us who have joined here today. And we definitely, I don't want to put you on spot, but we definitely look forward to some more engaging sessions like this, which kind of increases that circle of influence. And like, of course, LGMU is putting everything in place in terms that how we can be ahead of what's happening and empower our students and academic staff as well. So thank you, appreciate it really. And thank you to all the participants who joined us this afternoon. I hope this webinar was informative. And please look out for our posts on LinkedIn. Follow us as at Westford, and we will be collaborating with our partners in UK, that is LJMU, and have some great conversations going on this ever emerging new topics around AI and its use.